भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं पार्थसेवया भगवति उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, chapter 23, we are starting today the song of the Avanti Brahman, text number 1 onwards. Shri Badarayana Vacha, Saevam Asham Sita Uddhavena, Bhagavat Mukhyena Dashara Mukhya, Sabhajayan Vrityavacho Mukundas, Tamava Bhashe, Shravaniya Virya. Shukdev Goswami said, Lord Mukunda, the chief of the Dasharas, having thus been respectfully requested by the best of his devotees, Sri Uddhav, first acknowledged the fitness of his servant's statements. Then the Lord, whose glorious exploits are most worthy of being heard, began to reply to him. Shri Bhagwan Vacha, Paraspatya nastyatra sadhurve durjane rite Dhirakter bhinnam atmanam ya samadhatum ishvara. Lord Krishna said, O disciple of Brihaspati, there is virtually no saintly man in this world capable of resettling his own mind after it has been disturbed by the insulting words of uncivilized men. There is virtually no saintly man in this world capable of resettling his own mind after it has been disturbed by the insulting words of uncivilized. Actually, it all started from previous chapter where Krishna said, even if somebody ridicules you, beats you, one should tolerate. And Uddhav said, well, is any example in the history? How is it possible? In the modern age, there is widespread propaganda ridiculing the path of spiritual realization, and thus even saintly devotees are disturbed to see the progress of human society being obstructed. Still, a devotee of the Lord must tolerate any personal insult, though he cannot tolerate offense against the Lord himself or the Lord's pure devotee. But against his own self, he should tolerate. Na tatha tapyate vidha pumana banayastu marmaga yatha tudanti marmastha yasatam parusheshavaha. Sharp arrows which pierce one's chest and reach the heart do not cause as much suffering as the arrows of harsh, insulting words that become lodged within the heart when spoken by uncivilized men. But to speak of uncivilized men, spoken by anybody, it's difficult. That's why in Hindi there is a saying, "Na jo na mare goli se, wo mare tikhi boli se." And it's very, very harsh. Something that it, as it is said, it becomes lodged within the heart. Lodged within the heart means it doesn't come out. It just stays there. Any insulting words or harsh words. Kathyanti mahatpunyam itihasam ihoddabha tamaham varna yashyami nibodha susamahita. My dear Uddhav, in this regard, the most pious story is told, and I shall now describe it to you. Please listen with careful attention. The Lord will now relate to Uddhav a historical account which teaches how to tolerate the insults of others. Kenachid bhikshuna gitam paribhutena durjana smarata dhriti yuktena vikapam nij karmanam. Once a certain sannyasi was insulted in many ways by impious men. However, with determination, he remembered that he was suffering the fruits of his own previous karma. I'll narrate to you his story and that which he spoke. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows. Often those who give up the materialistic path and devote themselves to renunciation are attacked by impious persons. This analysis, however, is superficial. since the punishment is actually the cumulative result of one's own past karma. Some renunciants show lack of tolerance when presented with the remnants of their previous sins, and thus are forced to enter again onto the path of impious life. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore instructs that one should become as tolerant as a tree. If a neophyte on the path of devotional service to the Lord's pure devotees is attacked by envious persons, he must accept it as a consequence of his previous fruitive activities. One should be intelligent and avoid future unhappiness by rejecting the ethic of an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth. If one refuses to enter into enmity with envious men, they will automatically leave him alone. But that's Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said. So anybody acting enviously against a devotee, one should just tolerate. And as it says, if one refuses to enter into enmity with envious men, they will automatically leave him alone. And it was Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj only who said that first they'll ridicule you, they'll laugh upon you, they'll insult you, then they'll respect you, something like that. I think I posted that. But it's bound to happen. It's gonna happen. Of course, if somebody tries to kill a devotee or harm a devotee physically, he has every right to protect himself and protect his devotion service. And also, if somebody tries to harm another devotee, one should try to protect him. But on his own, he should be very tolerant. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And not just be tolerant. Then there is a step further. If we forgive him for what he has done. In fact, disciples of Jesus Christ asked him, because Jesus Christ said the same thing, you should forgive any offender. How many times we should forgive him? You should forgive him 7 times. What if he still commits offense? Forgive him 7 times, 7 times. Means always forgive. How fast one should forgive? Before the offender even finishes his offenses, you should forgive him. Very, very heavy statements. How much tolerance we need to have. And not just forgive him. Devotees, even Jesus Christ, devotee, he is a devotee, goes further beyond than that. Not just forgive. They work as his well-wisher. That is even beyond. They pray to the Lord, pray to Krishna for his well-being, the person who committed the sins or offenses. Like Jesus Christ, when he was on the cross and he was being nailed on the cross and ridiculed and everything was going on. And he was praying to the Lord, oh my Lord, please forgive them because they don't know what they do. They just don't know. Similarly, the incident of Haridas Thakur, Lord Nityananda, and other devotees, so many devotees. How they just forgave their offenders. Avantishu dvija kaschit asidadayatamaha shriya vartha vritti kadarayastu kami lubdho atikopanaha. In the country of Avanti, there once lived a certain Brahman who was very rich and gifted with all opulences and who was engaged in the occupation of commerce. But he was a miserly person, lusty, greedy, and very prone to anger, although he was a Brahman. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Avanti country is a district of Malwa. This Brahman was extremely wealthy, doing business in agriculture, banking, and so on. Being a miser, he suffered agony when his hard-earned wealth was lost, as it will be described by the Lord himself. Gyatyo atitheyastasya vangmatrenapi narchitaha shunyavasat atmapi kale kame ranarchitaha. In his home devoid of religiosity and lawful sense gratification, the family members and guests were never properly respected, even with words. He would not even allow sufficient gratification for his own body at the suitable times. So even the guests and family members were not properly respected, even with words, but to speak of offering some seat or some other items. And although he was a Brahman, Duhishilasya kadariyasya duriyante putra bandhava dara duhitaro britya vishanna nacharan priyam. Since he was so hard-hearted and miserly, his sons, in-laws, wife, daughters, and servants began to feel inimical towards him. Becoming disgusted, they would never treat him with affection. So, what do we expect? Tasyavam yakshvittasya chyuttasyo bhayalokatah dharma kama vihinasya chukrudhu panchabhagina. In this way, the presiding deities of the 5 family sacrifices became angry at the Brahman, who being niggardly, guarded his wealth like a yaksha, who had no good destination either in this world or the next, and he was totally deprived of religiosity and sense enjoyment. And even he didn't even do sense enjoyment. He was so miser. He wouldn't even spend any money. Tadavadhyana visrasta punyaskandhasya bhurita artho api gacha nidhanam bhavaya sa parishrama. O magnanimous Uddhava, by his neglect of these demigods, he depleted his stock of piety and all his wealth. The accumulation of his repeated, exhaustive endeavors was totally lost. So even the demigods were not happy in his house, the deities. The Brahman's stock of piety became like a withered branch that no longer gives fruits or flowers. Srila Jiva Goswami comments that the Brahman had a trace of piety directed at the Supreme Lord with hopes of liberation. That pure portion of the branch of his piety remained unwithered, eventually giving the fruit of knowledge. So he had some trace of piety directed at the Supreme Lord with hopes of liberation. So he must have done some agyat sukriti, something. Gyatyo jagruhu kinchit, kinchidasya uddhava, devata kalata kinchit, brahma bandhor nirpartiva. Some of the wealth of this so-called Brahman was taken away by his relatives, my dear Uddhava, some by thieves, some by the whims of providence, some by the effects of time, some by ordinary men, and some by government authorities. So they all are there to take away all the wealth of any person anyway. It appears that even the so-called Brahman was determined not to spend his money. His wife and other relatives managed to squeeze out a portion. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, providence here refers to fires in the home and other types of occasional misfortune. Effects of time here refers to the destruction of agricultural crops through seasonal irregularities and other such occurrences. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out that one should not merely proclaim oneself to a Brahman, but should actually understand one's original identity as a servant of the Lord. One declaring himself to a Brahman but maintaining a materialistic mentality is not a real Brahman, but rather a Brahmbandhu or so-called Brahman. The humble devotees of Lord Vishnu, following the indications of the Vedic scriptures, refer to themselves as unfortunate and unable to understand the kingdom of God. They do not proudly proclaim themselves to be Brahmins. Those who are wise, however, know that such humble devotees are actually Brahmins, whose hearts are cleansed by the pure mode of goodness. So actually he called himself a Brahman, so-called Brahman, but he was a Brahmbandhu because he was not following the prescribed duties of a Brahman, although born in a Brahminical family. So but he should have done the service, done the duties of a Brahman. But slowly, because of that, he lost all his wealth. Saevam dravine nashte dharma kama vivarjita upekshitascha swajanascha chindam ap duratyayam. Finally, when his property was completely lost, he who never engaged in religiosity or sense enjoyment became ignored by his family members. Thus he began to feel unbearable anxiety. And this is what happens when one loses all his opulence. He gets ignored by his family members. Just like we also studied in this story of Jadabharat. Tasyavam dhyayato dirgham nashtarayas tapasvina khyadyato bashpa kanthasya nirveda sumahanabhut. Having lost all his wealth, he felt great pain and lamentation. His throat choked up with tears and he meditated for a long time on his fortune. Then a powerful feeling of renunciation came over him. The Brahman had previously been trained in pious life, but his vast goodness was covered by his offensive behavior. Finally, his previous purity was reawakened within him. Sachahedam aho kashtam vrithatma me anutatita na dharmaya na kamaya yasyarthayas idrisha. The Brahman spoke as follows: Oh, what great misfortune! I have simply tormented myself uselessly, struggling so hard for money that was not even intended for religiosity or material enjoyment. So finally, he got the realizations and the knowledge. Prayanartha kadaryanam na sukhaya kadachana ihi chatma upatapaya mritasya narakaya cha. Generally, the wealth of misers never allows them any happiness. In this life, it causes a self-torment. And when they die, it sends them to hell. A miser is afraid to spend his money even for obligatory religious and social duties. Offending God and people in general, he goes to hell. So it's not that one should just waste one's money, but one should spend properly, intelligently on everything that is required, and especially obligatory religious and social duties. One should spend money. Yasho yashasvinam shuddham shladhyaye guninam gunam lobha svalpo api tanhanti shvitro rupam ivepsitam. Whatever pure fame is possessed by the famous and whatever praiseworthy qualities are found in the virtuous are destroyed by even a small amount of greed, just as one's attractive physical beauty is ruined by a trace of white leprosy. So greed, when greed is there, then the pure fame, whatever he has possessed, it just is destroyed. Arthasya sadhane siddhe utkarshe rakshane vyaye nashopabhog ayasas prasas chinta brahmondranam. In the earning, attainment, increase, protection, expense, loss, and enjoyment of wealth, all men experience great labor, fear, anxiety, and delusion. And it is connected as well. It's definitely there. You have to work hard to make money and then to protect it, to increase it, and if you lose it, there is plenty of fear, anxiety, delusion, everything is there. Steyam hinsa nritam dambha kama krodha smayo mada bhedo vairama vishvasa sanspardha vyasanani cha. Ete panchadashanartha hri artha mula mata nrinam tasmad anartham arthakyam shreyo arthi dura tastyajit. Theft, violence, speaking lies, duplicity, lust, anger, perplexity, pride, quarreling, enmity, faithlessness, envy, and the dangers caused by women, gambling, and intoxication are the 15 undesirable qualities that contaminate men because of greed for wealth. Although these qualities are undesirable, men falsely ascribe value to them. One desiring to achieve the real benefit of life should remain aloof from undesirable material wealth. The words anartham arthakyam or undesirable wealth indicate a wealth that cannot be efficiently engaged in the loving service of the Lord. Such superfluous money or property will undoubtedly pollute a man with all of the above mentioned qualities and therefore should be given up. Wow, wonderful qualities are mentioned here. Vidyante bhratarodara pitara suhridastatha eka snigdha kakinina sadhya sarve araya kritaha. Even a man's brothers, wife, parents, and friends united with him in love will immediately break off their affectionate relationships and become enemies over a single coin. Obviously, that must be from some other Kali Yuga, some other time, but it's true this time also. Arthe nalp piyasa hiete samrabdha deeptamanyavaha tyajanti ashus prido granti sahasot srijya sohridam. For even a small amount of money, these relatives and friends become very agitated and their anger is inflamed. Acting as rivals, they quickly give up all sentiments of goodwill and will reject one at a moment's notice, even to the point of committing murder. All this time, we read about it all the time, and these things do happen. Labdva janma mar prarthyam manushyam tat dujagritam tadna dhritya yesvartham vinanti yanti ashubham gatim. Those who obtain human life, which is prayed for even by the demigods, and in that human birth become situated as first-class Brahmins, are extremely fortunate. If they disregard this important opportunity, they are certainly killing their own self-interest and thus achieve a most unfortunate end. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments as follows. Human birth is better than that of the demigods, ghosts, spirits, animals, trees, lifeless stones, and so forth, because the demigods simply enjoy celestial pleasures, and in other forms of life, there is excessive suffering. It's only in human life that one deeply considers one's ultimate benefit in life. Human birth is therefore more desirable than even that of the demigods. Within human life, the position of a high-class Brahman is certainly most desirable. If a Brahman, however, gives up the devotion service of the Lord and works hard like a Shudra simply for the prestige of his community, he is certainly on the platform of material sense gratification. The special qualification of the Brahmins is the spiritual knowledge by which they recognize every living entity to be an eternal servant of the Lord. A Brahman free from false ego thus feels himself lower than a blade of grass and tolerantly offers respect to all living entities. All human beings, and especially the Brahmins, should avoid becoming killers of their own self-interest by neglecting Krishna consciousness, the loving service of the Lord. Such neglect paves the way for future suffering. Of course, here it said Brahman, but this more of a, not like a caste Brahman, but more of a devotee. So Brahman free from false ego thus feels himself low. That's only true for a devotee, a Vaishnava. स्वर्गापवर्ग योद्वारम प्राप्य लोकम इमं पुमान् द्रविणे कोनु सज्जेत मर्त्यो अनर्थस्य धामनि. What mortal man, having achieved this human life, which is a very gateway to both heaven and liberation, would willingly become attached to that abode of worthlessness, material property? So that which one intends to use for one's personal sense gratification is called material property, whereas paraphernalia to be used in the Lord's loving service is understood to be spiritual. One should give up all one's material property by utilizing it completely in the devotional service of the Lord. A person who owns a luxurious mansion should install the deity of the Lord and hold regular programs to propagate Krishna consciousness. Similarly, wealth should be used to build temples of the Lord and publish literature scientifically explaining the personality of Godhead. One who blindly renounces material property without utilizing it in the service of the Lord does not understand that everything belongs to the personality of Godhead. Such blind renunciation is based on the material idea that this property could belong to me, but I don't want it. Everything in effect belongs to God. Knowing this, one neither tries to enjoy nor to reject the things of this world, but peacefully engages them in the service of the Lord. So, any property is material if we are attached to it materially for our own sense gratification. If it is used for the service of the Lord, then it is spiritual. Any property, not just house, car, phone, laptops, anything that we are so attached to. And more we are attached to it, more problems it will give us in the end. So that is why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Mrityu sarvarasyaham. In the form of death, I take away everything. So sooner or later we have to give it up anyway. But if we are too attached to it, even if we die and we lose our gross body, we'll again get the body, maybe in the form of an animal or an insect in the same property. That'll be even worse, because soul knows I worked so hard to create this property, but I don't own it now. And I get beaten up if I try to come inside. That's even worse situation. But this is what happens. So Bhagavatam, this is what Bhagavatam teaches. Use everything in the service of the Lord. That's all we have to do. And then we'll be all okay. So I guess we can stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri.